Did Lori share with you how she felt towards Chad at that point?
Yes.
And what did she tell you?
She told me, they very much loved each other. They loved each other, in previous mortal probations, there was a lot of affection.
Outside of multiple probations, did Chad let me back up. Did Lori ever indicate anything about having a special mission here on Earth?
Yes.
And what did she tell you about that?
She felt that she was part of the 144,000, and then as she developed her relationship with Chad, she felt like they were the head leaders of it.
And when you talk about the 144,000, can you explain a little bit about what that would mean?
It's reference from Scripture and the Bible and the Doctrine and Covenants about a group of 144,000 that would be here during the return of our Savior, and they would help do a great missionary work throughout the world. And they would have, a lot of a spiritual endowment from on high.
So if someone were to be the head of that 144,000, would that be a pretty high calling?
Absolutely.
Would that be a position of pretty significant power?
Yes.
And when you talk about they may have shared this with their inner circle or their close friends, do you know who that would have included for them?
Yes. It would have included Sulema Pastenis, Serena Sharp, Christina Atwood, Nicole, forgot her last name, Melanie Pulowski, and I believe she told her sister later on, and I don't know how much she shared with her family. I believe that's, and Alex. I don't believe, let's see. Those are the main people.
And when you say Alex, Alex who?
Alex Cox, her brother, Lori's brother.
Do you recall approximately when Lori started talking about being part of the 144,000 or the head of the 144,000?
Right when I met her.
And then I think so. And I guess I should break this down. I kind of ask a compound question there. So she first starts talking about being part of the 144,000 when you first meet her. Would that be correct?
Correct.
And then I think you'd already indicated after she met Chad, she indicated that she and Chad were the heads of the 144,000 or the leaders.
Correct.
Do you recall approximately how long after meeting Chad she started telling you that?
Within weeks, probably.
Do you recall Lori ever telling you about a light and dark scale?
Yes.
Did she ever explain to you what the light and dark scale was?
She did.
And what did she tell you regarding that?
She told me that people that were light were people that before they came to this planet, when we lived in a pre-mortal realm, basically our spirits lived there before we physically came here, that those that signed contracts and made agreements with the Savior were light, and those that were dark were those that signed contracts with Satan.
Do you recall when she first started telling you about light and dark? The light and dark scale?
It was sometime after she met Chad, that few weeks, when she met him. I would say probably pretty immediate. It feels like it was like, it could have been possibly that weekend or just days after that, after she met him.
And when she would tell you these things, would she also essentially be teaching you about this?
Correct.
Did you observe her teaching any other people these things?
Yes.
And do you recall who else you observed her teach these things to?
I saw her teach them to the girls that I mentioned earlier, her brother, and just a few other friends that I did podcast with.
Did the teachings about light and dark evolve over time?
They did.
What else did Lori end up telling you regarding someone that was dark?
I'm sorry, repeat that again.
What else did Lori tell you regarding someone that was dark?
At first it was, they were working under the contract of Satan, and so they were more on that dark side, and it would change, often more and more, but
could someone switch from being light to dark or dark to light?
I believe so. I believe that's my memory, yes.
And just backing up a little bit, when we talk about that inner circle, do you recall if Brandon Boudreaux was part of that circle?
Do you mean like sharing the beliefs with?
Yes.
Or, no, we didn't share. She didn't share, or Chad didn't share with him any of that information that I know of. I mean, she could have, but I don't remember it.
Do you recall Brandon ever being at any meetings or gatherings where you were there?
I don't recall that.
Did you ever talk to Brandon about anything Lori was telling you?
No, not during my friendship with Lori, no.
What about Charles Vallow? Was he present for any of the teachings or the gatherings or the meetings?
No.
Do you believe that Lori would have considered him part of an inner circle?
No.
Did Lori ever tell you anything with regard to an individual being possessed?
Yes.
And what did she tell you regarding that?
So my first experience with her sharing that with me was, I recall she was in, I believe it was the second house that I met her in, so it was probably, that January time of 2019, and she first started telling me she was in the backyard of her house. She came in and she started sharing all the information she just heard from Chad. Chad let her know that Charles Vallow was taken over by an evil spirit, and that was the first time she had heard of it. And then, that made him dark, according to them.
And that was in January of 2019?
I believe that is correct.
Did Lori talk to you about a dream she had had?
Yes.
And what did she tell you regarding a dream she had around that time?
So she shared with me that Charles was getting ready to go to Texas, and I don't know if he was there already, but that she had saw him in a car accident. I believe JJ might have been with him in the car accident, but that he died in it. And so he would not be coming back home by January 1st.
And do you know if JJ was with Charles during that time?
He was.
And do you know if JJ would have been traveling back with Charles?
Yes, he was.
Do you know if Charles was in an accident at that time?
He was not.
Did you ever talk to Lori about the fact Charles was not in an accident?
Yes, I did.
What did she tell you regarding that?
I asked her what happened. You shared that you thought he was going to pass away. And she said he didn't because Satan interfered with the plan.
And when she talked about the plan, did she tell you whose plan it was?
She would talk about just from her own experiences. Often she would either have what she would call revelation about different experiences with Charles, or maybe she would And also, she would also talk about her experiences with Chad and how they envisioned getting together, that their spouses would pass away, so that was the plan that was revealed to them. They believed that their spouses would pass away.
With the idea being that once their spouses passed away, they could be together?
Correct.
Based on what Lori was telling you, was it your understanding as well, because Charles was dark, he would need to pass away?
Correct.
Do you recall Lori ever talking to you about castings?
Yes.
What did she tell you regarding castings?
So she would say that she was trying to understand how to get these evil spirits out. And so her attempt to do that was to have like a prayer where she would, like you maybe would read from the scriptures, where you would try to encourage the spirit to come out by the power of God.
Did you ever participate in any castings or observe them?
Yes.
Do you recall when that would have been? Approximate, if you can remember.
Probably January, February 2019 is after, she learned that Charles was dark, so sometime after that.
And I apologize because you may have already said this, but was Charles the first individual that you ever heard Lori call dark?
Yes.
Do you recall where that casting would have taken place?
The first time I recall was at Sulema's house.
Do you recall who was present for that?
Lori, Sulema, Christina, Nicole, Serena, and me.
And those are some of the same individuals you'd previously mentioned, is that correct?
Yes.
And you talked about castings being kind of a prayer. Was there any other element to the castings?
I guess so. It was definitely out of context for what I would, see anybody talk about in a spiritual level in any religion, but they would use terminology that to me sounded kind of like energy work, and so they would try to share words like disconnect or cords, like a cord was something you connect your spirit to your body, something like that. They use different elements and words. I didn't use those type of words. I just talked about, my relationship with Christ. And so I don't recall exactly how everybody spoke those words, but it was their attempt to help convince the spirit to leave the body.
And so to back up a little bit, when we talk about to convince the spirit to leave the body, would that be the evil spirit or the presence that had come in, or would that be the actual individual spirit?
It would be the spirit that took over that particular person's body.
Do you recall what Lori told you regarding where the original spirit from that body was?
In the beginning, it was, they would be, I believe it was they were either in the spirit world or spirit prison. I can't remember in the beginning. That's where they would be stuck sometimes between this world and that world. It kind of changed a lot, so I'm sorry if I'm not real accurate, but it was either they were on the other side, that they had moved on in the spirit world, or either somehow they were stuck or something like that.
And you're just fine. I'm just asking for what you recall.
Okay.
And I recognize it's been some time.
Yeah.
With regard, so what she told you, though, is the original spirit is out of the body.
Correct.
The physical body is still alive.
Correct.
And another entity or spirit is in that body.
Correct.
Do you recall what she told you regarding if the other spirit, the evil spirit, the entity is cast out of the body, what would happen to the body?
So the first time they thought they were able to cast out this first spirit that took over Charles's body, whose name was Ned, when that spirit left, so they weren't sure how it worked. And so after they believed Ned left, then they would see that Charles was still alive. And then they would come up with another idea that maybe another spirit, and then they come up with another name that spirit was the one that took over his body.
And when you say they would come up with, this wasn't something that you were told all at once then?
Oh, no.
So as time went on, teachings evolved?
Absolutely.
And you refer to when Ned leaves Charles' body, another entity or spirit comes in?
Correct.
Did they give that a name that you recall, or did Lori ever refer to that entity by any name?
Yes.
And what was that?
Then after Ned, it was Garrick, I believe. Garrett? Maybe Garrett.
And then what happened with regard to Garrett?
Then he supposedly was cast out. And then after that, another one, if I think it's the final one, was something like Heblos, something like that.
And I think you said you participated in a few castings. Did you participate in any other castings regarding Charles?
Yeah, there was several with Charles, yes. Mm-hmm.
Were those castings done as new spirits would come in?
Yes.
Do you recall if Lori indicated whether or not the original spirit could ever come back into the body?
No, I don't recall that.
Do you recall if they told you anything, do you recall if Lori ever used the term zombie?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when she used that term?
It wasn't in the beginning, but I would say weeks after the original idea that someone taken over the body, they just started using that terminology. I would just say weeks after that.
And with that, you talked about participating in several castings on Charles. And we talked about who was at the first one. Do you recall if it was the same individuals at the next casting?
There could have been not different people generally, but just maybe less of the group. I know that there was another lady, but I don't even remember her name anymore, but I think she was there very shortly.
Do you recall if Lori was present for all of the castings you were at?
Yeah. Yes.
And was she present?
Yes.
Just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you recall if Chad was present at any of the castings?
I can recall one. It could have been more, but I can recall one.
And the one that you recalled Chad at, was that a casting for Charles?
Charles had already passed away. It was right after his death.
Do you recall who else you did castings for or participated in castings?
I'm not quite sure. It feels like it could have been Brandon Boudreaux, but that's what I can remember.
Do you recall if Lori ever told you that Brandon Boudreaux was dark?
Yes.
Do you recall if she ever told you whether or not he had an evil spirit in him?
Yes.
And did she indicate that he did have an evil spirit?
She did.
Do you recall if Lori told you anything else about Brandon Boudreaux?
Yes, so it evolved. So he was, I believe he was dark from the beginning. I could be wrong on that, but that's my recollection. And then he became a very high level dark. So the darkness kind of evolved into, like, they had multiple lives as well. And then he was supposedly part of Hitler's group during that regime. So he just kind of it just evolved like that.
Do you recall if you participated in castings for any other individuals?
I don't recall.
And I think you indicated the casting that Chad participated at would have been after Charles' passing?
Yes.
So to the best of your recollection, would that have been the one for Brandon Boudreaux?
That's what my recollection is.
And outside of the castings, were you ever told that anyone else was dark?
Yes.
Do you recall who else you were told was dark?
So it was Charles. That was Brandon. Her brother, not Alex, but another brother of hers. Eventually her dad. And then Tylee, then Kay, then at the very end JJ, and just random people that I can't recall, but those are the ones that I'm recalling at this moment.
Do you recall if you were ever told anything by Lori about Tammy's, whether she was light or dark?
If she was considered dark, it was right before she passed, so.
Were you ever told, with regard to Tylee being dark, did Lori ever tell you whether or not an evil spirit had entered Tylee?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when that would have been?
It was sometime between probably February or March to June, somewhere. I believe when she was in Texas, maybe she shared with me when she was in Texas, which you probably can recall better when she was in Texas than I can, but it's probably like in May or April whenever she was there. That's what it feels like. That's what it was.
Do you recall approximately when, well, actually, let me back up. Did she ever tell you if JJ was taken over or possessed by an evil spirit?
Yes, she did.
And do you recall approximately when that would have been?
Was it September 2019? Is that when I was? Yeah, September. September.
In 2019?
Yeah.
And was that the first time you'd heard of JJ being possessed?
Yes.